Sophie and James, who are about to go and get a service robot. Unlike James, Sophie is a little stressed and seems not happy with the whole idea. Then the movie takes us 3 months back, the day when Sophie is stuck with a dirty sofa which she had dreamed about it, and now she wants to see the same scenario in real life, in which her husband should carry it inside the house. James, who knows his wife, agrees to take the sofa into the house. They both live a happy and simple life together in their small house, and they are not rich yet, but with a phone call, their whole life changes. James's father passed away, and he has to take over the company and his father's position. Plus, they have to move to the house their father left. In the first day of their life in the palace-like house, James wakes up and is about to go to work very early. Sophie also comforts him not to rush, now that he is the boss, but James is stressed out because he is going to take his father's place and he wants to have a good impression on his staff. He gives Sophie a book so that she won't be bored in his absence, and then leaves for the company. After James leaves, Sophie goes into the kitchen to make herself breakfast, where she sees Rosa and Barry doing the housework. She, who has never had a life in which been served like this, does not eat the breakfast that was prepared for her. A few moments later, Rosa enters her room and asks Sophie what she likes to have for lunch, but Sophie doesn't like to be called ma'am or to be served, and likes them pretty much just to leave her alone. Also, Rosa tried to convince her that she is just doing her job to get paid and she needs her job and is happy to serve her, but still Sophie fired them. At night, when James comes home from work, he does not see any servants in the house, and finds out that Sophie has sent him home with 2 years' payment, although James is concerned about handling that big house. However, Sophie promises that it won't be a problem. But the very next day, the first problem occurs and Sophie calls James in an important meeting, saying she has a problem with lawnmower machine. James comes home at night exhausted and tried it out, but it didn't work. The next day, Sophie calls her again and says that she is afraid to be alone in this big house. She doesn't want a servant because she doesn't want someone to serve her. James consults his colleague, Ronald, about the problems he has at home about the dismissal of the servants. Ronald offers him how to buy a servant robot. James convinces his wife to do this, and together they go to the institution that Ronald mentioned the other day. Julian, the director of the institute, explains that the capabilities of all robots are the same, and he suggests Jessica to the couple, but Sophie is not happy with that female robot because if that robot comes to their house, she no longer will be the most beautiful girl in house. So they decide to have a male robot, and Julian offers them Henry and instructs them about the features and his obedience. For instance, he asks Henry to kneel down and lick James's shoe. The robot needs to be returned to its station so that it can be repaired or changed. After Henry gets up and does the housework, Sophie still refuses to eat the breakfast that Henry made. When she looks at him, she sees a human, not a robot, and doesn't feel right to give him orders. James, who doesn't know what to do anymore, tells her to deal with it by herself. Sophie goes to the bathroom after James leaves. When she comes out naked, she finds Henry in a room looking at her. That's why she picks up the phone again and calls James. James is explaining to her behind the phone that Henry is a robot. Maybe he is looking at her body, but he doesn't want to eat her or whatever she is afraid of. But Sophie still believes that Henry has something in his looks that makes her uncomfortable and asks James to return home quickly. When James returns at night, he takes Henry to play squash game and asks him if he believes in God. Henry believes in the person who has made him, not like human who doesn't know for sure where they come from, but they believe in something like God anyway. The next morning, Sophie realizes about James and Henry and their good time last night. So she starts talking to Henry about different things, and her dream about that sofa, and wondering if robots are able to dream. To which Henry says no, it's not in their program. Sophie later gives Henry the book that James has given her and asks him to read a chapter every day so they would have something to talk about. After Henry reads the first chapter of the book and talks to her about it, Sophie realizes that her perception of the first chapter was similar to Henry's. The next day, while Sophie and James are relaxing, Henry brings them some drinks. Before he leaves, Sophie asked him about the book and the main character of the book. Henry believes that the main character of the story became interested in the female character of the story out of lust, and that there was no love between them. But James believes the male character sacrificed everything, including his friends, his family, and his entire youthful life to get to the female, and asks him what is his definition of lust. Henry believes it's a kind, sensual desire for someone, or even something. Sophie asks Henry if he feels lust or any sensual affection. Henry says that he can emulate lust if they lead him or want him to. James says no, he doesn't need to feel that, and orders him to bring them some snacks. That same night, Sophie notices that Henry has left his station. A little later, she finds him naked in backyard sleeping. She goes to wake him up and notices he is like dreaming. She asks him to make sure. Henry says he dreamed he was human. With the help of James, they return Henry to his station, and the next day, they tell Julian about Henry's dream. Julian believes it's a kind glitch. Sophie says that his eyes were moving in his sleep, as if he was really dreaming. But Julian says the robots are designed to please the owner. Maybe one of them has done something or asked him to dream. After Julian leaves, James tells Sophie that Henry is a machine and to stop treating him like a human being, so that he doesn't imitate people to please her as his job. When James comes out of the shower, seeing Henry, he quickly wraps his towel around him, but throws it away, remembering that he is just a robot. He tells him that he is like his shaver, a machine, not a person. That night, knowing that Sophie was upset, James lights up some candles to turn things into a romantic night. Sophie forgives him and excuses herself to be tired and sleeps. Later, we see that Sophie is lying on the bed when James is not home and getting massaged by Henry, in which he starts to kiss Sophie on the body, and when he reaches her neck, temperature rises for Sophie. She rolls over on the bed, but before things get real, she is woken up by James. She cannot hide the dream from James, but claims that she doesn't remember anything. After James left, she's still hiking in that dream. Therefore, she opens the room door to Henry, then lies down on her bed and gets busy with herself. While working, she makes loud noises to drag Henry in, but she hears Henry's footsteps going down the stairs. Sophie wants to know if he heard her on the bed. Henry says if he did, will she get pleased? Sophie avoids answering and asks him to make her breakfast. In the afternoon, they are sitting by the pool and talking. Henry is happy because he sees that Sophie is laughing. James also notices this bonding between Sophie and Henry, and he goes to Julian to complain about his robot that has fallen in love with his wife and is spoiling his marriage. Julian believes that this is impossible, but if James sees Henry a threat, he can bring back and replace it with another robot. James knows that Sophie doesn't let him to change Henry for another, so he tries to control Henry by giving him orders around. He orders Henry not to show affection to Sophie anymore and not to flirt with his wife. He also orders not to read books with his wife and not to analyze them. Henry quickly goes and delivers everything to Sophie and tells her that James gave him these instructions. Because both of them are his owner, he cannot take orders to benefit one against another. With this, Henry starts a big fight between Sophie and James, which Sophie leaves the house. When James and Henry are alone, James asks him to come over and shave his face. But this time, Henry comes completely naked and says that he is just a machine. So it is alright. James has not had a good relationship with his wife for some time because of the problems that Henry has created, so he does the things with Henry that he wanted to do with Sophie. After some time, Sophie finally returns home. She asks Henry to massage her body like she dreamed. During the massage, Henry asks her to close her eyes and then starts kissing her, but Sophie also continues along with Henry, but gets triggered when Henry tells her that he loves her. Sophie gets very upset and tells him why did he said that. Henry believes he would please her by saying it. She asks Henry to go back to his station. After James comes, she tells him everything. James also gets upset and tells her that he knew this would happen. He is a robot. He does whatever he feels like it would make them happy. James goes to Henry's station and wakes him up to ask him, why did he kiss his wife? Henry says he just wanted to please her. James says she didn't ask for it, or did she? Henry is like she overbegged for it. James punches him in the face and asks him to return to his station. He then disconnects all the electrical wires in the station. They call Julian the next. After disconnecting the wires of the station, James tells Sophie that she can't move anymore and goes to work, but after he leaves, Henry comes to Sophie and tells her why they want to throw him away. Sophie assures him that won't throw him away. If James is upset, it's because they are husband and wife, so he shouldn't have kissed her. Henry says that if James is upset that he kissed her, why she is not upset when James did it with him when she weren't home. By this, Sophie walks to James' office. She asks Julian on way out to turn Henry off until she returns. After seeing the situation, Julian gets scared and realizes that there is a serious trouble. On the other hand, Henry is feeling the pain by touching the spot he received that punch last night when Julian comes and orders him to return to his station. But Henry doesn't follow the order of his creator anymore and tells Julian he found out his lies. Meanwhile, Sophie finally arrives at the company and asks James to start explaining, but he has nothing to say except jealousy he felt about Henry, because he just wanted his wife to look at him the way she is looking at Henry. Sophie believes that all husbands and wives have problems in their married life. She also thought that her husband doesn't have time for her because of his business. Meanwhile, James' secretary informs him that somebody by the name Henry has tried to call him several times. They rush home when they get there, even though Julian's car is parked in front of the house, but there is no one inside. They see Henry through windows standing naked outside. They go out and Sophie with a knife to be safe. They get to Henry and ask him what happened to Julian. Henry says that Julian is a liar and has been lying to him all this time. James tries to comfort him by saying that he is right whatever he believes and orders him back to his station so they can find someone to fix him. But Henry doesn't want to be a functional robot now that they want to get rid of him. Then the couple head to the institution to find Julian. But as soon as they reach the place, they see that the whole area is full of police and they are interrogating the employees of the institute. The police tell Sophie and James that Julian is a fraud and that he has been enslaving and brainwashing people since their childhood and selling them to people as robots. When they find out that Henry is not a robot, they take tow policemen with them. But before they get to Henry, Julian shows up and kills the policeman. He tells Sophie that he had found and saved Henry when he was 3 years old with a body full of bruises and dying of hunger. He was the one who turned him into such a perfect and powerful person. When Julian is about to shoot Sophie and James, Henry shows up and saves them by finishing Julian. Then he returns to his spot and ends his life by the knife that Sophie left on the grass earlier. Henry tells Sophie and James that he is done with this world, and he knew it was real. His feelings and love and the dreams that he had were all real. 5 years later, Sophie and James name their 4-year-old son, Henry. Their son is curious why did they choose his name, Henry. Sophie says that they took his name from a very special name, and whenever they feel he is ready, they will share the whole story with him.